Hi guys, today we're looking into the Round Oak roll crash. Was it a disaster? Could it have been avoided? 14 dead, 50 injured. Roll the credits. On the morning of Monday the 23rd of August 1858, a woman called Sarah Rogers was getting herself prepared for a day of excitement in Worcester. That day, the local company, the Oxford, Worcester and Wolverhampton Train Railway Company, had put on an excursion trip to Worcester for the local people of Brierley Hill and Pensnet, Tipton and other ends. So lots of people were getting involved. They asked for children and for teachers only, but the train was open to the public. So the turnout was much more than they expected. As a result of this, the train was packed to the point where they were standing up. Now this morning, Mrs. Rogers was preparing her sandwiches and getting ready for an amazing day. Little did she know that so many hours later, she would be lying dead in a field strewn with bodies, dying and dead. Awful. Let's have a look to how it happened. Let's see if it could have been stopped. So on the morning of Monday, the 23rd of August, the excursion train set off with 42 carriages and 4 brake wagons. The brake wagons were set out in intervals. The one at the rear was being controlled by a Mr. Cook, who was the rear guardsman, Frederick Cook. Frederick Cook had been in the business 8 years. He was an experienced guardman. A guardman is the man who controls the brakes. There would be 4 brake wagons to try and keep tension within the train. So yeah, 42 little tiny carriages. These carriages were not massive, they were small. These carriages would have been like the carriages you see on horses today, or in the past, should I say. So yeah, they set off for the excursion. They had a lovely day by all accounts, but the train was overloaded. On the way down, there were several instances where chains snapped between wagons. There was drinking and smoking in the brake wagons, and there are stories of Frederick allowing men who were in the train with him to work the brake, which was against the law. He shouldn't have been doing that. Anyway, on the way back, they got as far as Brittle Lane, and they decided to come up this steep incline. They would split the trains and take them back in separate ones. So there were 3 trains in all. The first one came back with our train with Frederick Cook on the back, heading towards Brettle Lane and eventually round Oak. The second one followed 15 minutes later, and the third one a few hours later with the stragglers on. So the 2 we're interested in is the 2 that are now setting off. So around 6:30 they left Worcester, heading for home. This is where one of the engineers heard the snap. Before they realised what was going on, the carriages were hurtling towards the oncoming train. The second excursion, 15 minutes behind the first. Mr. Frederick Cook, he basically tried to stop it, he said. In court they said different. I'm going to go through some of the court later, and you're going to hear some witness statements. So yeah, he said he pulled the brake, but he never pulled the brake, they say afterwards. And the train began to hurtle down the steep incline, 1 in 75 the incline. As it hurtled down, they knew the train was coming on. Mr. Cook frantically waved his arms, but there was lots of smoke from the ongoing factories. This was a place of industry, and it was just dropping dark. It was nearly 8 o'clock when they reached Brettle Lane. The driver who'd actually gone to Brettle Lane had realised now that these carriages have become detached, and he's frantically trying to get in touch with the other station to tell them to stop the train. Didn't happen. The train's coming. It's coming right there. The train's coming. It's coming there. It's hurtling around that corner now. It's chewing. Up here now. It's coming. Right way up here now. And down that corner there, you've got it also coming. So suddenly, Mr. Cook's waving. Stop. There's people on the bridge waving. Stop. The train spots it. Starts to slow down, puts its brakes into reverse. These are old trains, these aren't new trains, these are really old trains, guys. Puts its brakes into reverse. Suddenly, it stops, but the carriage is still coming, and by now they're hurtling, they're coming at speed. It was inevitable. They smashed into him with such force that it smashed 2 of the carriages to unrecognisable. The train in itself was not damaged, the funnel was broken, but there were mangled bodies and arms and legs and even brains splattered everywhere. People come running from all places. Here we have a statement from a person who witnessed it.
I was going to my house near Brierley Hill when I saw several railway carriages coming down the line from Round Oak station. I did not see the engine with them. I was standing on the bridge and watched them till I heard the alarm. I saw one coming from towards Stowbridge at the same time. The crash was so loud that it nearly took away my hearing. It was 200 or 300 yards from the bridge. There was one man there with a lamp, and he lighted a fire by the side of the rails. There was a loud shrieks, and when I got down there was 7 dead bodies under the wheels of the last 3 carriages of the detached train, the 3 that came up against the engine that was coming from Stowbridge. Some persons helped me to get these bodies out, and the others that were killed and some wounded. I don't know that I saw the guard, but there was a man in the short jacket and a band around his hat assisting to get the bodies out. I did not ascertain the cause of the train breaking away.
On this bank to our right, just here, that's where they all stayed, yeah? Because on the other side, as you know, there's buildings. So here, they all gathered on this bank in 1858. They had a little fire. All where I am now was strewn. You know, if we use the metal detector in the area, we might find pieces of that train, guys. It's that poignant. 14 people dead, 50 injured. When I say injured, I don't mean like, you know, a bruise, a cut, legs missing, toes missing, arms missing. It was in page 7 or 8, you know, this should have been page 1. They were poor people. The trains at the time were new. The investments were new. I've actually heard that there was some experimental stuff going on with the trains. They'd added to the suspension in Brettle Lane, and it was actually experimenting. You can't experiment with real people on live trains. This excursion, we used to have excursions, didn't we, Bert?
Nope.
We did, we could Blackpool, weren't we, on the coaches?
Well, we go on the Blackpool or Western Supermare, but...
Exactly. You know, back then it was a great thing to do for the people. I'm sure they made money off it. They were charging a 3p up to a shilling, depending on who you were and what class you went in. 2nd and 3rd class coaches. Over 2,000 people, I reckon, went on this coach train. 2,000. You imagine the weight in that carriage as it hurtled back down here and it hit, bang! You know, dead, death, destruction. The bodies were then carried to various pubs. The Cock Inn, not far away. They carried a few bodies there. Women were gathering around these pubs, looking at the gruesome bodies. Later on, they had the inquest. And they took Mr. Cook and arrested him on manslaughter, you know, because he was in control of the brake. He had 6 men in the carriage he shouldn't have had with him. He was allowing them to use the brake. There were breakages during the journey, and some people actually noted several jolts. One person's nose bleeding because of the jolts. Trains weren't safe then. They were never safe. They're still not safe today. Let's look at the Titan, you know. We always fix things once they're broke, but by then we've lost lives. This is the human condition. You know, we can't see danger. You know, I could have told you that Titan thing was a dangerous thing, but it went down and they died and they knew the risk and they signed the paperwork. Whereas these guys, they were going on a trip to Worcester. It's starting to rain now. This August night, it was a warm day. It was a lovely day by all accounts, but on the evening it was dark. And they had a fire lit here and they were using some of the rubble as they were picking the bodies from the wreckage. The bodies, people screaming and dying, you know, operations happening at pubs. There's one story of the bodies being laid out in an upstairs room and blood running down the side of the walls, guys. Blood. And this blood was being stared at by these women. Men were commenting that it was a bad thing that they were gathering around these corpses and seeing them as a gruesome thing. But Victorians were obsessed with death. But yeah, these were poor people. And the majority of people who suffered were from Tipton, which you're going to see in a minute when I read out the death list, because that's the part of the train where they were. We were always at the back of the coach. So if we'd have been back-ended, it would have been us in Pensionet that felt it. So yeah, I kind of understand that. And nothing changes, guys, but I don't know why they've not got a monument. I don't know why it's not been heard of. I've never heard of it. I was never taught this at school. You know, this was one of the biggest train crashes in the world to that point. And I mean, Captain Tyler was put in charge of it now. He was a proper snob, you know, and he was looking at charging everybody that he could. He was for the rail company, looking to protect the rail company's interest, saying it wasn't the train that was dangerous, it was the person doing it. But this guy had been in charge of a train for 8 years. In the end, he was acquitted, and the judge had this to say on the matter.
When a man had a duty to perform, if he performed it negligently and death ensued in consequence, he was liable for the consequences. But a man was not guilty of manslaughter merely because he did not do which a stronger or more clever or cool-headed person would have done under similar circumstances. There must in fact be culpability or something blamable in the prisoner to warrant the grand jury in finding true bill.
So yeah, they let him go, and rightly so. Yeah, he shouldn't have been in the train messing around, but they shouldn't have been experimenting on the train either. Either way, guys, this was a disaster of massive proportions. And what's really strange is, where we are now, we found that on the floor, look. So there's an account of somebody walking into one of the local pubs and finding shoes torn and bloodied. And we have this shoe. I know it's not torn and bloodied, and I know it's not from the accident, but it kind of rings true. On August 23rd, 1858, a train would have set off from here, an excursion train, 42 carriages. It would have been carrying people from all over the area, picking them up at various spots. This train was an excursion to Worcester. What they didn't know was a few hours later, 6:30, they would return. They would return in 3 trains, the first 2 coming 15 minutes apart. Just about a mile down the track, there was a disaster. And it was getting dark, folks, you know, can you imagine? Getting dark. And you have a lantern, Mr. Cook had a lantern. It was not good. But that was a train then. I thought he was having the rails cast all over again. So yeah, Mr. Cook, I think he was the scapegoat, folks, to be fair. Yeah, he shouldn't have been drinking on the train when he was working, but I think everybody did. Health and safety didn't exist then. But it happened here, folks, right here, man. I never heard of this. You know, all my life I've lived around this area. I had no idea that one of the biggest train crashes in the world to that point happened here, in our area. So yeah, it is poignant, folks, it is poignant. The horror that went on here. There's not even a plaque. You know, the bridge is there, guys. You know, they could put something on. So let's try and get something on there. Just a little plaque. Not all the names. Maybe the 14 dead, if not all the injured. But I'm going to read them out now for you. And they are quite poignant. So yeah, sorry about the descriptions. Some of them are quite gruesome. If you've got a tickled stomach, I wouldn't listen. But yeah, these are eyewitnesses. So, straight from the horse's mouth, guys.
The following is a list of the killed and the most serious cases of wounding. Killed: Richard Moore of Tipton, wounded by a splinter in the heart. He was about 30 years of age. Francis Mills, a furnaceman at Bloomfield Ironworks, Tipton, and residing at Prince's End. He was about 36 years of age. He had received injuries on the head, back and arm. Henry Marshall, middle-aged boatman from the Blockhouse, Worcester, injured in the head. He had worked 16 years for Mrs. Godwin of the King's Head, Worcester. Had gone up to Dudley for his mistress's boat for coal, but not being able to load in reasonable time in consequence of the colliers' strike, had taken advantage of the excursion train to come to this city to inform his mistress about it. Benjamin Skelding of Prince's End. Baker and grocer. His legs and feet were fearfully shattered, and he was in a state of great nervous exhaustion. He was carried to a neighbouring beer house, and next morning expired during the operation of amputating his legs, which was performed by Dr. Walker of Brierley Hill. Mrs. Skelding, wife of the above Benjamin Skelding, a youth about 17 years of age, named John Skelding, son of the above. His skull was fractured. Joseph Baker, an engine fitter from Prince's End, a single man, 35 years of age. Joseph Pitt, about 28 years, single from Prince's End. He was a waggoner to his father, a scrap iron merchant. Mrs. Hildrick of Park Lane, Tipton, wife of a sawyer, Edward Matthews of Walbrook, Cosley, Pudlier, about 25 years of age and single. Henry Weston, labourer, Prince's End. Mrs. Harley Taylor, wife of William Harley Taylor, Stafford Street, Dudley. With the exception of Mrs. Skelding, these were all taken up dead or died within a few hours of the accident.
The sun was setting on the 23rd of August, 1858. Just there. There was a horrific crash. An horrific crash, guys. The Pencenet or the Round Oak rail crash. This was a disaster beyond proportion. You know, people were mourning massively. It was in all the papers, but it made it to the middle pages, not to the front, because alas, they were poor. You know, not many people were interested in them. Very sad. They cleared the line within 2 hours, and they had trains that were waiting, moving again. You know, things were done differently back then, I know. Trains were new. The fact the carriages look like carriages is really freaky to me. And the fact that we've got this building here, which is really contemporary, I believe. I don't think this was here at the time, but it wasn't far out, guys. It wasn't far out. Okay, thanks for watching, folks. Hope you enjoyed it. This one I really enjoyed doing, because it's really poignant, you know. We're here at the place where all those people died. I think it needs a plaque, personally. But, who knows? It needs recognising. Hopefully this will go some way towards recognising it. The Round Oak crash and the people that died in it. Thanks very much, guys. Thanks, Burt. Special thanks to Burt and Shell for helping out and Brilliant, man. See you on the next one, folks. Loving it.
All bells in paradise, I heard them ring. Bits gold on the outside and silver within.